They raised their champagne flutes, toasting my brother David like he was royalty reborn. Then, right there beneath the chandeliers and fake smiles, my mother turned to me and said, "It's time you gave him the penthouse." I laughed until her hand cracked across my cheek. In that moment, surrounded by applause and betrayal, I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just smiled. Because they had no idea the kind of storm I was about to become. Some birthdays mark time, others, they tear right through it. My brother David's 35th birthday was meant to be another one of those predictable evenings, expensive catering, forced laughter, and me, Lily, pretending I hadn't already counted down the minutes to my escape. I thought I'd be gone before dessert. Instead, I left with a red mark on my face, my dignity intact, and the kind of clarity that only comes after a public betrayal. They say blood is thicker than water, but that night, mine ran cold. Let me back up. I'm 31, single, not searching, the first in my family to go to college, the first to break 6 figures, the first to understand that freedom isn't something you're handed, it's something you build. I built mine with sleepless nights and stubborn grit, founded a tech startup in my 20s, sold it before 30, and bought a penthouse that felt more like poetry than property. But success doesn't impress people who can't control it. My parents, Susan and Robert, were proud only when my money served their needs. David, 4 years older and permanently coddled, was the golden child who failed upward. Failed smoothie truck, failed crypto channel, failed life coach podcast. Still, he was their baby. I was just the wallet with opinions. That night, everything changed. The mask dropped, the gloves came off, and I finally saw my family for who they truly were. The invitation arrived in thick cardstock, gold-foiled, and way too elegant for a man who still used his college email. David's 35th, A Night to Remember, it read. Hosted by my parents at one of the most expensive steakhouses in the city. No RSVP from me, just a note scribbled in Susan's handwriting, "You will be there." I already smelled the setup. They'd never thrown a party like this for me. Not when I launched my first app, not when I bought my penthouse, not even when I sold my company. But for David, a man whose resume included a smoothie truck collapse and a failed attempt at being a crypto influencer, for him, nothing was too grand. Still, I went, out of obligation, or maybe curiosity. I dressed in sleek black, timeless and sharp, and carried a $500 0 cents bottle of whiskey from Kyoto, the kind David would fake appreciate and then forget in someone else's liquor cabinet. As I walked into the private dining room, all conversations stopped, like someone had pressed mute on the scene. My mother's smile was tight, brittle. My Uncle Raj muttered something to his wife and avoided my eyes. I knew this dance, the way they always seemed to brace themselves for my presence, like I was a stray dog they didn't know how to pet. The table was long, the air thick with steakhouse butter and unspoken judgment. David, of course, sat at the head of it all, arms slung casually around his reality star-in-waiting girlfriend, sipping wine like royalty. I took my seat in silence and watched the show. The toasts began. One by one, the family sang hymns to David's greatness. "Resilient," said Jess. "A visionary," said my father. "Our heart," said Susan, misty-eyed as she praised him for surviving every crash and burn with grace. And then came dessert. Lava cake, topped with edible gold. Of course. That's when my father stood and tapped his spoon against his glass. His eyes met mine, not warm, not inviting. "We're not just here to celebrate David's birthday," he said, lifting his glass. "We're here to honor his next chapter. He's found clarity, focus, a future." People nodded. I sipped my wine. "But every visionary needs a launch pad," he continued, his voice gaining momentum. "And that's where you come in, sweetheart." My spine straightened. "We think," he said, drawing the words out slowly, "it's time you pass on the penthouse. David needs a place to build, to create, a place that matches his ambition." At first I laughed, truly laughed. I thought it was satire. I waited for the punchline, but no one else was laughing. Susan chimed in next, rehearsed and polished like a press secretary. "You live there alone, Lily. It's too much space for one person. That penthouse could be a lifeline for David. He needs stability. We all agree this is how you can support your family." They had planned this, scripted it. David didn't even bother pretending to be surprised. He grinned like he was receiving an award he didn't earn. I set down my glass. My voice was calm. "No." The room froze. Robert's face twisted. "Don't be petty, Lily." Uncle Raj snorted. "You don't need that much space anyway." Jess leaned in. "It's just temporary, a year or two. You've always been the independent one." I stood slowly. "I'm not giving up my home because David refuses to grow up. I earned every inch of that space. While you were all cheering his failures, I was working 16-hour days to build something real. You know how many Christmases I spent alone so I could meet a deadline? Gasps scattered like glass shattering. And then Susan stood. She crossed the distance between us in 3 strides. I didn't flinch. But I didn't expect the slap. It cracked across my cheek like thunder in a church. The room fell silent. My face burned, but my soul was ice. "You selfish little brat," she spat. "After everything this family has done for you, you can't make one sacrifice?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman who didn't know me, never had. I turned to David. He shrugged, sipping his wine, his eyes bored. And in that moment, I knew they would never see me as more than their safety net, their solution, their stepping stone. So I stood tall, voice low and calm. "That's fine," I said. "But don't call me again. Any of you." And I walked out, past the gasps, past the glares, out into the night with nothing but the sound of my heels and my heartbeat, pounding steady like a war drum. That night, I didn't cry. Not a single tear fell. I didn't reach for a friend or call anyone who might tell me it was going to be okay. Because it wasn't. And I wasn't looking for comfort. I was building resolve. Instead, I stepped into the silence of my penthouse like it was a war room. The lights of the city glowed beneath the glass walls, but I didn't see them. I went straight to the bar, poured myself a bourbon neat, and booted up my laptop. There was only one thought in my head. They wanted a war? Fine. I'd show them what it looked like when the person they treated like an afterthought finally stopped playing nice. First, I called Richard, my lawyer, the same one who had negotiated the sale of my company with surgical precision. He picked up on the second ring. "I need to set up asset protections, comb through every shared document I've ever signed with my family, and initiate legal distance from every joint obligation I might be tied to. Today." He didn't ask for context. I paid him too well for him to need any. Then I pulled up a number I hadn't dialed in years. Grace Klein, private investigator. We'd crossed paths during my startup days when a co-founder tried to quietly siphon funds. Grace had found everything. Shell accounts, deleted messages, whispered connections. She worked in facts, not favors. "Grace, it's Lily. I need a deep dive on 3 people. David, Susan, and Robert. Full scope. Assets, debts, shady business dealings. If it's buried, I want it unearthed." There was a pause. "Is this about money or revenge?" she asked. "Both," I said. "Give me a week." I poured another bourbon. The fire in my chest didn't dull. It roared brighter. That slap at David's party wasn't just personal. It was a declaration. A calculated move, delivered in front of our extended family, to shame me into surrender. But I had one thing they didn't expect. Time, money, and the will to burn their little show to the ground. The next day I made another list. This one wasn't about law or leverage. It was about people. I started with Vanessa, my cousin. She'd always been kind, a little quiet, the only one who didn't cheer when David strutted into a room. Then Aunt Laya, the one who never seemed fully comfortable at these family spectacles. Even Uncle Raj had whispered to Priya that night, like he was embarrassed to be part of the circus. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I wanted confirmation, allies, witnesses. So I called. Vanessa answered after 2 rings. "Hey, Lily, look. I don't know what happened, exactly, but I was slapped in front of 30 people for refusing to give up my home," I said. "Do you know what it feels like to be punished for independence?" Her voice dropped. I thought they were just teasing, that it was a joke." "It was never a joke," I said. "It was an ambush." She was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, "I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve that." Next came Leah. Her voice wavered when I recounted the evening. I always knew Susan had expectations, but I never imagined. "God, Lily, she hit you?" "Yes." "On his birthday?" "In front of everyone." "Yeah." "I don't care who hears this," she said, voice steel-edged now. "That's disgraceful." Even Raj, once the quiet enabler, admitted, "I knew something was off. The whole dinner felt rehearsed." He sighed. "They kept mentioning how proud they were of David, like they were trying to convince themselves." The cracks in the armor were showing, and I wasn't done yet. By the end of the week, Grace's report hit my inbox. It was heavier than I expected, digitally, emotionally, and legally. David had unpaid debts from multiple states, one LLC after another, each one more laughable than the last. His motivational brand had taken out small business loans using Robert's retirement as collateral. Meanwhile, Susan had shifted large sums between personal accounts and an offshore holding under the name Sunfire Trust, an entity I'd never heard of but one Grace assured me was very much illegal if it involved my name without consent. They weren't just greedy, they were sloppy, entitled, and desperate. I sent everything to Richard with a note: "We move now." While legal motions were filed in the background, I took care of the visible front. I crafted a carefully worded letter, not for my family but for the rest of them, the outer circle. The cousins who believed Susan's stories, the aunts who gossiped in kitchens, the uncles who thought success made you cold. I didn't call it an exposé, I called it clarity. In it, I explained how I paid for David's rehab, twice, how I had covered my parents' mortgage when their business nearly defaulted, how they begged for money under the guise of emergencies, only to turn around and host extravagant dinners for David's podcast launch. And most of all, how they demanded I give up my home because their favorite child needed a fresh start. I didn't name call, I didn't accuse, I let the facts speak. And then at the bottom of the letter, I wrote one final sentence. "This is not a vendetta, it's a boundary." Then I hit send. Within hours, responses trickled in, some angry, some shocked, most stunned, silent. But a few, just a few, wrote back with words I hadn't expected. "Thank you for telling the truth. I always wondered. You were right to walk away." The tide was turning. My family had spent years painting me as cold, calculating, and ungrateful, but now, with receipts, with witnesses, with the slap that echoed louder than they ever imagined, it wasn't my character on trial anymore. It was theirs. They wanted me to be silent. I chose to be surgical. And I wasn't done. They say revenge is best served cold, but mine came with candles, Korean short ribs, and gold leaf on dessert. I sent the text out 3 days after the slap: "Let's make peace. I'd like to host a dinner, just us. Let's celebrate David and clear the air. One evening to heal." The kind of message that looks like surrender. That's what I wanted them to think. The RSVPs trickled in almost too eagerly. My parents replied within minutes, all sunshine and smiley faces. David gave a thumbs up and added, "Make sure the food's good this time." I bit back a laugh. They were walking right into it. Saturday came like a storm you can smell before it hits. My penthouse shimmered in warm light, fresh flowers, crystal glasses, and every surface polished to a shine. I had the playlist set to soft classical, Debussy mostly, the kind of music that makes people think you're still the one being polite. And the food? I spared no expense. David's favorites, every last one. Short ribs marinated in pear juice, saffron risotto, that stupid $80 0-cent truffle mac and cheese he once bragged about online. I made sure it all looked perfect. Let them feel comfortable. The first knock came at 6:52 p.m. Susan and Robert, arm in arm, like they hadn't publicly humiliated me 2 weeks prior. Their smiles were tight, and their eyes scanned the room like they were calculating square footage. Then came David, 10 minutes late, of course. Emma was with him, in a red dress cut high and dipped low, a statement if ever there was one. The small talk buzzed over drinks, everyone laughed too loud, sipped too fast, and pretended not to remember the slap, the demands, the silence that followed. I played hostess, refilling wine glasses and nodding at bland compliments. It felt like watching a play I'd seen 100 times, but this time, I knew the ending. Once dessert was served, a dark chocolate torte laced with espresso and crowned with gold leaf, I stood up. "I want to thank you all for being here," I said, voice steady. "After everything, I thought we needed a night to talk, to be honest with each other. And I know this family has always asked me for transparency, so I figured I'd give it to you." With a click of a remote, the room transformed. The floor-to-ceiling shades dropped. My 85-inch screen flared to life behind me. Slide 1, a screenshot of David's email inbox, subject lines like, "New LLC for cash flow," and "Just use Lily's info again, they won't check." Slide 2, transfers, $20,000 0 cents. Wired from a shared family account to a fake business, under David's name. The money was meant for repairs on my grandfather's cabin. Gone. Slide 3. Grace's surveillance. Audio recordings of David talking to friends about wearing Lily's penthouse like a crown and laughing about how easy it was to guilt mom and dad into anything. The gasps came slowly. My mother's wine glass trembled in her hand. My father didn't blink. I could feel the weight of every eye in that room turning from me to them. And then the last slide, a forged tax document. My name, my signature, used to claim losses on an investment property I'd never even visited. The document showed my father's signature too, neat and bold beside mine. Except mine was copied from a lease I signed years ago. Grace found the match. My father's face went pale. My mother stood up so fast her chair screeched against the hardwood. "This is slander," she hissed. "You're tearing your own family apart over what? Hurt feelings? You're trying to destroy us." "No," I said quietly. "I'm finally showing you what you've already destroyed." Emma stood abruptly. "I'm not going down for this," she muttered, and grabbed her purse. David's mouth opened, then shut. His usual smirk was gone. I turned to him. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? You didn't just come to my home. You came for my name, my future." Robert started to speak, but I raised a hand. "Don't bother. The documents are already with my attorney. A formal fraud complaint will be filed on Monday, and you'll all be hearing from the IRS soon. Turns out, they don't like unreported income from fake LLCs. Silence, the kind that buzzes in your ears." Vanessa, my cousin, who'd been silent the entire evening, reached out and touched my arm. "You didn't deserve any of this," she whispered. I nodded but didn't speak. I didn't need to. The evidence had spoken for me. One by one, the guests gathered their things. No one rushed to defend David or Susan or Robert. They just avoided eye contact, shuffled toward the elevator like school kids caught cheating. And as the door slid closed on the last of them, I exhaled for the first time all night. I wasn't shaking, I wasn't crying, I was still standing in my home, and for once, I wasn't the one with something to prove. "You didn't just slap me," I said, my voice even, yet thick with every year of swallowed pain. "You tried to rob me, you tried to erase me, you used me like a walking bank account, a backup plan, a doormat in designer shoes, and then you dared to shame me when I stopped letting you feed." The room went still, not that theatrical stillness people fake for effect, but the kind of stillness that follows a lightning strike, when everyone's too afraid to breathe because the truth just split the sky open. No one said a word. No one dared. But I wasn't finished. I walked over to the glass table by the window, where I'd left a small folder, leather-bound, not for show but for certainty, and slid it open. "I've already filed legal motions," I said, lifting the paperwork, my fingers steady. "Starting Monday, every shared account, every asset I ever contributed to under this family's name will be frozen. Every dollar will be reviewed for rightful ownership. And yes," I looked directly at my father, "I have filed charges for identity fraud. You forged my signature, Robert. I don't care that you're my father. You lost that privilege the moment you tried to sell my name like it was yours to spin." The silence cracked under the weight of it. Susan gasped, sharp and sudden, like a woman physically struck. Her pearls trembled at her neck, a parody of dignity. Her fingers clutched at them, as if they could anchor her to the version of herself that still held control. I didn't blink. I walked to the balcony doors and pulled them wide open, letting the wind rush in like a verdict. "If any of this offends you, you're welcome to leave. This isn't your stage anymore. It's mine." And they did. Robert didn't even argue, just moved like a ghost past the velvet drapes. Susan sobbed into the collar of her blouse as she followed, mascara streaked across the mask she used to wear as a face, and David, sweet, deluded David, looked at me like a man watching his kingdom burn from the throne he never earned. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it, realizing at last there were no more words that could make him important again. They left with nothing but the weight of what they'd done, dragging it behind them like a tattered coat in the rain. The only ones who stayed were Aunt Lia and Vanessa. Quietly, without asking, they helped me gather the wine glasses and fold the napkins. Vanessa hugged me at the door, tearful. "You didn't just stand up for yourself," she whispered. "You stood up for every one of us. Who's ever been made to feel small in this family?" When the door finally clicked shut behind them, I stood alone in the golden hush of my home. The city lights blinked beyond the glass like stars brought down to earth, reflecting off the marble floors. I poured myself a drink from that same bottle of rare whiskey I'd brought to David's birthday. Ironic, isn't it? What was once meant as a peace offering now tasted like victory. I stepped onto the balcony, barefoot, letting the cool stone kiss my skin. The skyline stretched around me like a crown I'd finally earned, not handed down, not borrowed, not taken in guilt, but earned. That penthouse? It wasn't just a home anymore. It was a fortress. It was proof. I hadn't just kept it, I'd defended it. Not with rage, not with violence, but with calm, cold truth. With boundaries, with action, with a name reclaimed from the mouths that tried to devour it. They thought their slap would shame me, but all it did was wake me up. They thought their lies would silence me, but all they did was give me a microphone. They thought I'd cave, that I'd give in, like always. Instead, I handed them a mirror. Revenge didn't make me cruel. It didn't make me heartless. It made me whole. Because this wasn't about punishing them, not really. This was about taking back the parts of me they tried to rewrite. And in doing so, I wrote my ending. A week later, the legal freeze was official. My accounts were protected, their schemes exposed. My lawyer confirmed that the charges for identity fraud had teeth. "They'll never be able to touch your name again," she said, and I smiled, not because I was glad they'd suffer, but because I was finally safe from the suffering they kept trying to pass off as love. And here's the best part, that penthouse? I redecorated. Took down the old family portraits, hung new art, paintings that made me feel seen. I planted fresh herbs on the balcony, started cooking again, laughing again, living again. One evening, while watering the basil by the window, I caught my reflection in the glass, soft light on my face, hair pulled back, a quiet strength in my eyes I hadn't seen in years. And I realized this is what healing looks like, not loud, not dramatic, just firm, just steady, just mine. So to anyone out there who's ever been told they owe their silence, their space, their very soul to people who call it family, remember this. You don't owe your life to the ones who only love you when you're useful. You don't have to stay small to keep others comfortable. And if they try to take your light, shine anyway. Because one day, you'll look around and realize, you didn't just survive the fire. You built your home from the ashes. And it's beautiful. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever had to stand alone just to reclaim your peace, don't let it end here. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to walk away from people who were supposed to love you? I read every one, and your stories matter. And if you're still here, still watching, that means you felt it too, so hit that subscribe button to join a community where we tell the hard truths and celebrate the quiet victories. Turn on notifications so you never miss a moment that just might mirror your own. And please, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that walking away isn't weakness, it's power. Because sometimes family isn't who you're born to, it's who you become when you stop apologizing for your light.